definitely won't appear in the World Championship match. And that has affected his play. So if you don't play your normal openings, if you try and kind of play a bit wild, play something surprising, wow, talking of surprising, it's 1b3.
Yay! Oh, I have to almost give a little bit of applause to Magnus Carlsen for giving us 1b3 on the final day in the tour. Yay!
Yeah, it is great news, but it's also a little bit risky because I remember a few years ago, Wesley did an opening course on this particular opening. I remember that he said, no, I don't want to give away any of my opening secrets, so I'm going to do an opening repertoire on this move.
Yeah, that was funny. It was about 5-6 years ago now, but Wesley so created the course despite the fact he'd never, ever played this move as white himself. So now we see Wesley so already thinking, maybe surprised by this move by Magnus Carlsen. OK, maybe Wesley not realising the game had started there. But either way, Magnus, he's giving a nod to 𝙬𝙬𝙬, the beast, who created this really famous, really successful course for chessable on this opening, and also using it with success on our tour. 𝙬𝙬𝙬, of course, beating 𝙬𝙬𝙬𝙬 with this b3 move, and we've seen Magnus play everything.
And Magnus has also won games with this, at least one game he won with this opening.
Exactly. He's played everything, Magnus, but this is one of his pet favourites if he just wants to get a game. Look how white is just completely ignoring the centre for now, but white's dark-squared bishop has a nice hiding place for the rest of the game. Also exerting some pressure with that dark-squared bishop.
So this is the whole point with his opening, right? That dark-squared bishop.
Yes, exactly. And you stay super flexible. You wait to see how your opponent sets up in the centre with his pawns, and then you react. So depending on what the opponent does, you might strike with the pawn in front of the white king, or in front of the white queen, or in front of the white pawn on the c-line. So you really just play a bit of a waiting game and then react. And it's a bit annoying for black, because as black, you have a free hand. You can do anything you want. And talking of doing anything you want, Wesley So has played another really rare move. He's just pushed a pawn on this right side. That looks very mysterious, but he's actually just creating a safe place for his light-squared bishop later in the game. So Wesley So, I mean, I must admit, I've never played this move before as black. I've never even seen this move before as black. But he is trying to react to the surprise from Carlsen with his own surprise. And now both sides playing a waiting game. Neither really wants to fully occupy the centre or fully strike out, initiate any trades yet. And, OK, Magnus, this is a sign, firstly, that he's saying to Nepomniachtchi, you're not going to learn anything here, but also that he wants to entertain us with a really tense battle.
I love it. And is this opening one opening that you would say don't do this at home, kids? Is it like only for grandmasters? Because we already see there's a little taking of the centre, at least for white.
In general, you need to be quite... you need to at least be well-versed in these types of lines. It's all about practice. But if you're wondering how to go for this different types of strategy, definitely check out that chessable course.
Definitely.
Because it's for all levels. It's not just for grandmasters. It's for beginners, club players. And actually, I know a lot of club players, especially, who use this type of opening, and their opponents just have no idea how to react. So there's no such thing as a bad opening in chess if you know the plans, if you know the ideas behind them.
Yeah, and I have to say, I have been trying to learn 𝙬𝙬𝙬's course on Chessable, and just because of the spaced repetition and the move trainer, I find it quite easy. And I can tell you that 𝙬𝙬𝙬 in these type of positions, he advocates playing something very, very spicy. It involves a pawn sacrifice in the centre. But we'll see if it happens.
There we go. Maybe Magnus Carlsen is going to get ready for such a pawn sacrifice, Ivanka, because white has just pushed another pawn there. So not developing the white light-squared bishop yet, which was maybe his intention with the previous move, but he's getting ready to push a pawn forward in the middle of the board to harass and attack the black light-squared bishop that's developed towards the centre. And now Wesley So striking with his pawn. So now both sides are starting to take some space, are starting to control some squares. And I expect Magnus Carlsen to quickly rush and try to complete his piece development. That would involve moving white's light-squared bishop and castling the white king away to safety. Only then should you pick which pawn to push for white in the centre. Normally, you definitely try to delay that decision as long as possible. There we go, Magnus moving his bishop out. He's looking very relaxed on his mouse there, Magnus Carlsen. I think against 90% of the black possible moves, he's going to just castle the white king away to safety. And, OK, black's knight coming out, very understandable. Will white castle his king, or will he challenge maybe now in the centre by bringing the white knight forward? There we go. White's knight springs forward. This, again, is a very thematic, typical idea in this type of opening. black's knight, once it has developed, is a target. And actually, white is happy to trade a set of knights because white has less space with his pawns. Also, any trades will benefit the white bishops, which are now opened up on great diagonals. There we go, a trade of knights. And now Magnus will surely castle. Maybe he can push a pawn first, but white cannot delay much longer.
Yeah,
okay, he brings his knight up first.
And, OK, so the idea that white has is, of course, to castle, as you mentioned, and also to push forward in the centre with a pawn. And then, of course, the position quickly is what I want to say, opens up. Yeah.
And who do you prefer here, Jdvanka? White is very, very flexible, can choose a variety of pawn pushes later, but black has more space temporarily.
You know, it's quite funny because I tend to play this particular pawn structure with the black pieces, but I somehow prefer white.
Maybe a sign that you can add it to your repertoire.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying. I'm trying to memorise 𝙬𝙬𝙬𝙬 chessable course.
OK, and meanwhile, we saw Magnus Carlsen just with half a smile on his lips a moment ago, maybe because of his position, but also maybe because of the music. And meanwhile, Wesley has developed his bishop. And big question for Magnus Carlsen, is now the time to strike? Do you throw pawns forward in the centre of the board, or do you continue playing slowly, developing and castling the king? There we see Jan-Krzysztof Duda just behind Magnus, very focused on his own game. Magnus now, he will want, with the white pieces, to put some pressure on. And talking of pressure, he's going for it now, Magnus. He's trying to open up the middle of the board just before black's king is also safe. And now black's light squared bishop is attacked. Two choices for Wesley, so he has to either take that white pawn in the centre, allow a trade, or he has to step back with his bishop, retreat it to a safe square. And personally, I would rather retreat that bishop. There we go, black's pawn centre. If we saw pawn trade there, black's pawn centre would have disappeared and white would have access to more key squares. So black keeping his bishop nice and safe. And now it must be the moment, surely, for Magnus to open things up, maybe trade a set of pawns in the middle. If he doesn't play this, OK, he's actually getting ready to castle first, equally sensible. Look at the dark squares that have been highlighted on the screen. OK, he doesn't click his king. OK, he changes his mind a couple of times, and then he goes back to this move. So he does eventually.
And I'm expecting Wesley to copy, and there we see it there. And in this type of position, you kind of mentioned making some trades. Is there an argument to be made for white being even more aggressive and pushing pawns?
Yep.
And I'm thinking of the F pawn, move it up 2 squares.
Yeah, now that Magnus has castled first, I think it makes less sense to trade in the centre because black's knight can even take back if we see a trade of pawns in the centre. You're right, Jdvanka, that is maybe the critical move for white to push a pawn in front of the rook forward on the F line, 2 squares, trying to, again, throw that pawn forward. But it is very, very committal. It loosens squares behind it. Any pawn pushes you might regret because pawns don't move backwards. They leave weak squares behind. And that's why Magnus, instead of committing, stays flexible. He moves his queen to the side. So the white rooks are connected. This is something everyone at home should be doing in every single game, connecting your rooks if possible, because then they protect each other. They have a lot more flexibility. Normally they want to swing across the board towards the centre. You can only do that once your queen is out of the way. But yeah, Wesley So, he's played very quickly up to this point, despite being surprised on move 1. And right now, Wesley So, he still has some questions to answer. What central pawn formation, what pawn structure does he want to head for? Because black could block it up, black could open it up. And, it's definitely a stylistic thing here, but you also have to talk to your pieces. Maybe the black pieces aren't ready for things to open up. And
OK, so he attacks the queen and...
OK, so white's queen either has to move or this attack has to be blocked. Black's bishop there, hitting the queen, cannot be captured. It's defended by black's knight. What do you think? Block or move?
Block, but I'm a little bit scared to volunteer my suggestion.
OK.
Because I wanted to block with the pawn,
no,
which is
I wanted to as well.
OK. Woohoo! Yeah.
White has choices here. White could offer a trade, for example, block with the white light squared bishop, but the pride and joy of white's position is that bishop, and there you go. It's your move, Jdvanka. White has blocked with a pawn.
Yes.
So the reason I think we're both attracted to this move, and Magnus as well, is because black's bishop on the edge of the board right now might be a target. White could throw pawns forward against that piece later, gaining a bit of time.
Yes. That was exactly my idea, just to throw the pawns forward using the bishop as a target. And whilst we're waiting for Wesley to make a move, well, today, for our quiz of the day, we are turning things around in partnership with our friends at MasterCard. We are asking you to ask us the questions. And hashtag Brian Esposito on Instagram asks us, what would you say was the most shocking blunder that happened during the tour?
Ooh. Since this is the last day of the tour, I'm going to have to rewind the whole way back to day one. And day one, we were just warming up with a nice day of chess, and then suddenly Magnus mouse-slipped and blundered his queen against Nepomniachtchi, his future challenger. So that was very, very dramatic.
I remember you guys mentioned it, like, in the build-up, like, yeah, Kaya, we have something called mouse slips in online chess. Maybe we've seen it, but, you know, these players, they practice on their mouse skills. But, yeah, there is something called a mouse slip, and I was like, wow. And then first game, mouse slip. That was amazing.
Yeah, it was a queen as well, with pieces. Yeah, I have to agree with you, David. That came as a big shock because that was a quite emotional, tumultuous game. And then suddenly that mouse slip killed it. And we were like, I just remember that quote, I think we've seen a mouse slip.
And I said, no!
And what a way to start a tour. Maybe that's why it's been so dramatic, because it started on that note, right?
Right, yeah.
Great question.
Yeah. And if you too want to enter quiz of the day, then you can tweet your questions using two hashtags, priceless and chess champs, or you can go onto the Champions Chess Tour page on Instagram and you can post your question there and we will try and answer them in the studio. Can't wait. Bring them on.
Yep, and talking of bringing it on, Magnus Carlsen has retreated his bishop. He's saying to Wesley, so bring it on, push your pawns forward. I don't care what you're going to do. I'm going to attack the black king later. And I think Magnus has in mind a bit of a slow plan, but it does involve pushing pawns on this king side forward towards the black king. And Wesley, so I think he's a bit worried if he blocks it up that would give Magnus a free hand to attack. So it's a bit of limbo right now for Wesley. So he doesn't want to commit. He doesn't want to touch anything, really. But you have to make a decision in chess. Either you slowly improve a piece or you clarify the pawn structure. And Wesley, so spending a couple of minutes. This one is heating up slowly. It's a lot of tension. Only one set of knights have left the board. We're on move 14. We've been playing for 15 minutes, but only one trade. This is how tense it is right now. Both players want to win, and neither of them will want to end this fantastic tour season on a loss. Yeah, been a difficult couple of days for both of them. Yeah,
and Magnus, he definitely surprised Wesley, I guess, with the 1b3.
Yes, and it's not even about the surprise first move, it's about this kind of surprising, unorthodox middle game that you achieve afterwards. It's all about plans, and, OK, Wesley so decided not to block it up, which maybe would have been the most ambitious move. Instead, he trades a pawn in the centre, and the evaluation bar really doesn't like that one. I'm surprised as well, because he's basically saying to Magnus, once we have a trade of pawns in the centre, I just want to make things symmetrical. OK, and Jovanka, you're surprised. You're shocked by that last move.
Totally, because I thought the game was going to develop along normal means. And, well, Wesley So felt that this was a desperate position for him, and desperate positions require desperate measures. And he just struck out by pushing the F-pawn. Sorry, I got a bit carried away with the emotion. It was such a surprising move. You don't play like this, do you?
No, especially when Black's pieces aren't ready. He's striking out in the centre. He's trying to be ambitious and aggressive. But look at the Black Queen, look at the Black Rook in the left corner, not participating. And we see a trade of pawns there. Things have opened up, but this surely is going to favour White. White's pieces, especially the White Queen, is primed and poised to strike. So, yeah, very, very surprising play by Wesley. So Magnus not flinching, not reacting, keeping his poker face. And now I expect to see him maybe centralise one of the two white rooks.
Right, I totally agree with you. I was thinking if the white rook could just move to the light square, to the D line, or maybe the E line as well, you know, then White has complete control, and there's an unpleasant... OK, so the rook does move to the D1 square, and now the rook is eyeing up the Black Queen, and White is one move away from getting a devastating position. If the White Knight moves, just steps forward, then suddenly it's going to be a lot of unpleasantries along the centre.
Yeah, Wesley was the one to choose exploding things open. Now look at the two central lines. They're completely open. No pawns there remaining, and white's queen fantastically placed. White's rook as well now also ready for the action. And, OK, a trade of bishops. I'm surprised Magnus Carlsen went for that so quickly. I thought maybe he had another option as well. But, OK, now Wesley so has to decide to recapture with the black queen, getting out of the eye line of white's rook in the middle there, or to recapture with his knight and allow a potential discovered attack against the black queen. OK, Wesley, I think he'll take with his own queen. He's not necessarily blundered, he's not necessarily made a mistake, Wesley so, but he's played very creatively and very provocatively. That's why we're so surprised here in the studio. But Magnus Carlsen, will he find a way to punish Wesley so for playing such brave, kind of reckless chess? I think now at this point, but neither player really fearing too much. They just want to, again, entertain everyone and create these really, really unique positions.
Is 1b3 a very online opening, or would you see it in over-the-board chess as well?
You see it over the board. It's normally by players who maybe don't want to invest too much time studying between tournaments, or maybe players who are part-time amateurs who have a full-time job. They don't have time to study openings too much because you don't have to memorize too much. It's all about ideas. But also, you often see it when you have a higher-rated player with white against a lower-rated player, because they're scared if they go into the mainline type of openings, then it might just lead to a forced draw. So it keeps a lot of tension in the game.
Yeah, and I also want to say, usually only played by cowboys. Sorry, that's just my joke. Because the people who play b3 call themselves cowboys. So
b3 cowboys.
Exactly. And it's like you develop a passion for the opening, and then when you have a passion, and there often is a community around it, and you kind of share ideas, and there's a real sense of spirit there. So, I mean, a lot of grandmasters, I'll say, have been seduced by this positive energy around such an opening move.
Yeah, it's nice to keep things fresh as well, just to experiment a bit. Sometimes I've been in periods in my career where I just get bogged down in studying the same opening over and over and over again, and there's nothing more refreshing than trying a new line.
Yeah.
So, OK, we see a quick flurry of moves. Black did recapture the white bishop. White's knight sprung out, and black's rook, gaining a bit of time against the white queen, has now centralised itself and protected the black knight.
Yeah. And Magnus moving forward with his rook to the 6th row, attacking the queen. So the black queen must step away. And whilst Wesley is considering where to put his queen, I have a question from Omkar Dabka, who says, great commentary, guys. It's always a pleasure to listen to us. But do you think Jan has an advantage now for the finals next month, that he has seen more of Magnus's games or preparations?
Yeah, it's really interesting, actually. The two players, they've taken completely opposite approaches to the World Championship match.
Yeah.
Magnus has been super busy. He's been playing the World Cup. He's playing these tour events. He's been travelling. He played Norway chess. He travelled to Macedonia recently. And he even went to Dubai in the middle there. But Nepomniachtchi, apart from Norway chess, he's been pretty much silent ever since the candidates tournament in April. He's just gone deep into training mode. So, yes, he has more information about Carlsen, but Carlsen is going to be more match fit. He's going to be ready. He's going to be in the zone already. And, it's
maybe Magnus has just kept him too busy with analysing all the games Magnus is constantly playing. He's just have no time to play himself.
Dozens of new games a day for Nepomniachtchi to study.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't wait to when the players reveal who their seconds are. Because quite part of the fun is kind of second guessing. Okay, so rooks have lined up and there's now acute pressure on the knight. It's like, when you see the seconds, you can kind of guess what kind of openings they have prepared, what kind of style of chess that they'll be employing. And
you learn so much about what they've been doing, just knowing the personality of the coach, knowing the kind of favourite openings of the coaches. Yeah. Definitely some intrigue will revolve around the coaching teams up until the World Championship, and often the players don't even reveal who's been helping them until the last day, until it's all over. So, OK, Magnus Carlsen, he's creating threats in this game. He's got a 3-minute time advantage as well. But Wesley fighting the pressure by offering a trade of knights. And there we go. The white rook goes back to attack the black queen. The white rook's been here before, but previously the black queen was able to run away safely. Now it's less easy to do so. The black queen has to either step back or the black rook can block this attack. But I think the black rook blocking here would be a big, big mistake for Wesley. So what can he play here? Does he have to retreat that queen? Does he have to run away? It looks like that to me. Magnus definitely setting some traps for Wesley so to avoid. And there we go. Actually, Stockfish, the computer, confirms Black's only move to survive here is to retreat the Black Queen 1 square, to step her up closer to the Black King, closer to the Black Rooks. Any other move would lose instantly. And there we go. Of course, Wesley so finds it, but it did take him a bit of time. Now Magnus has a 4-minute time advantage. And also a nice position on the board. Stockfish thinking that White has a decent-sized advantage if he simply trades knights. And that's maybe the most natural move.
It's on the board. And now it's a kind of a question of how to improve the position. Step forward with the rook to attack the queen to the 7th row. That's one move that I can see.
Yeah, and that's one of the computer's top 3 suggestions. We do see Stockfish's moves again there. The other moves did involve maybe just bringing back the white bishop. White's bishop is stuck behind some pawns. You don't necessarily want to push your own white pawns in front of the white king because you might loosen squares, you might weaken yourself in the process. So White's bishop can actually step back towards the f1 square and then relocate. OK, I was saying Magnus didn't want to push pawns, but there we go. Ambitiously attacking the Black Rook. Magnus now, is he about to grab a pawn with the White Queen under fire? OK, surprising from Magnus Carlsen. This move might well be good, but it's also more risky. So Magnus, he doesn't worry about loosening his king position.
It also sacrifices a pawn.
White's queen
can just
taking a pawn.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
OK, so Wesley sacrificing a pawn.
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, so Magnus, his plan is to win a pawn. And White's queen can bring herself up.
Yeah, and also, hang on a second, just looked at, is there the possibility of actually just ignoring it and just going bishop to the middle of the board?
Yeah, Magnus has definitely got that on his mind. OK, what's he going to click on? White can temporarily sacrifice his queen, and we've seen it from Magnus a few times now. We saw it against Radjabov a couple of days ago. We saw it against Giri the day before that as well. He sacrificed his queen in 3 games, I think. Will he do that again? So, Jovanka, you mentioned ignoring the attack against the White Queen and counter-attacking against the Black Queen.
Yeah, that's one, and that's my personal favourite, is actually just to grab the pawn.
Yeah, so White's queen can also just get greedy, run away from the attack and grab a pawn in the process. And now Magnus, he's not... Well, this isn't the type of position you can rely on your instincts. He's not clicking on anything yet. You see on his screen there, on the chess24 play zone, that the last move, the dark squared highlighted squares, are just Black's last move. White's queen will most likely run away, or he might move his bishop. Key moment for Magnus Carlsen. I think if he moves his bishop, the game might well just fizzle out towards a draw. I think there'll be a lot of trades, a lot of exchanges. If he wants to win the game, Magnus, he must move his queen.
And I have a question from Alessio, who asks us, what's the best comeback that you didn't expect from a player?
Oof, comeback on the board.
Yes.
OK, Magnus does take a pawn meanwhile, and Black pushes to attack the White Queen to kick it away to a worse square. The comeback on the board. Ooh, that's a very good question.
I think for me it was Levon Aronian.
Coming back against Magnus.
Coming back against Magnus, you know,
semi-finals.
in the semi-finals of the Gold Money Asian Rapid. I mean, that was...
I think, so he lost the first match, and I think even he lost the first game on day 2, could that be right?
I think so.
He made a comeback to take it to tie-breaks.
Yes. Then he won convincingly in the tie-breaks.
I think he won 4 games in a row. He won the 2 last rapid games, and then he won the 2 tie-break games as well. And you never see Magnus Carlsen lose more than 1 or 2 games in a row usually. But Levon Aronian won 4.
Yeah.
And yeah, for me, maybe it was Magnus's comeback against Wesley So in the FTX Crypto Cup, where actually throughout the whole tournament, Magnus was struggling for form, barely qualified out of the qualification stage, out of the group. And eventually he did make it. He was behind in most of his matches, but he did eventually win the tournament.
Yeah, I remember that Magnus was really emotional. OK, the Queen does step back. He was really emotional about the whole thing. And he said, guys, I had to win 8 times on demand. OK, we see the rook capture the bishop, and we see now a trade. So, OK, Wesley is a pawn down, but as compensation, White's king, a little bit airy, not too many pawn defenders. And this just means that Magnus now has to tread with caution. Perhaps he is looking at exchanging a set of pieces just to consolidate his advantage.
Yep, I think if Magnus could trade queens here, he should be winning. If Magnus can trade rooks here, he should be winning. But it's not easy to do either of those. OK, Magnus does start with the offer of a rook trade, but this comes with some danger because the white king is on an open, vulnerable diagonal. There we go. The black queen checks that white king. The white king is going to have to try and run away to safety. Which direction will it go in? Will it step to the side, maybe protecting its rook, or will he hide the white king on the right side, on the corner of the board? It's not easy now for the world champion to find a safe haven for that white king. Personally, I would try and hide on the edge of the board, although that is super scary as well. Yeah. The white king might regret being that brave.
Yeah, somehow I agree with you there. I mean, it's tempting to hide the king in the corner, but somehow the black queen can mobilize herself to very active squares. OK, well, we have an answer. Magnus just simply walks the king to the bottom row.
Yeah, so stepping back, there's no real checks that black can go for now, unless he just trades rooks, which we know he really isn't that keen to do. A queen endgame might allow black some drawing chances with a series of checks, but eventually white's extra pawn might make itself felt. And yeah, Wesley So needs to decide. Would you keep the rooks on? He does. You like this decision?
Yeah, I like this decision because, I mean, white's weakness is this king's safety. And in order to attack it, in order to attack the white king, you need to keep all the pieces on the board. And, well, Magnus starts calmly advancing his pawns on the left, up the board.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. In a queen endgame, it's all about pawns, it's all about racing pawns, and Magnus Carlsen, he's just getting ready long term just to push his pawns forward. That's the side he has the advantage. White has 3 versus 2 on that left half of the board, and he's hoping that later on, if the rooks come off, then his head start with his pawns will be a key factor. And there we go, Wesley So blocking the advance of white's pawns. Also a very, very sensible, logical move. Now it's harder for Magnus to make use of his 3 versus 2 advantage. So now Carlsen, he needs to keep the white king safe. Still very loose, very airy, as Jd_ăňka said. And okay, he thinks he's solving those problems by bringing the king closer towards the centre.
Oh, the irony here. I mean, now that, I must admit, I don't think that idea would ever have dawned on me. But now it's on the board. Kind of like it.
Yeah, it's very logical. It's in an endgame. A king needs to be towards the middle of the board. If the queens ever disappear now, then white's king is far better than black's. And look at this, Magnus Carlsen, he's got that in his mind. He wants to trade queens. He knows that that would guide him towards the win. Also, it would make the white king feel much, much safer. So Wesley cannot dream of trading queens. Also, Magnus has an idea in mind. If the black queen comes down to the second rank to check the white king, white will simply block with his rook. And queens are great in the middle of the board. The white queen will actually protect a lot of squares. And wow, Wesley So forced to step back. That is not a positive sign for the American.
No, it certainly isn't. And there you can see Magnus calmly reinforcing his king safety. But the big issue is still, you know, white does have an extra pawn on the left side of the board. Will he be able to utilise that? And in the meanwhile, Wesley has attacked a pawn with his queen, but Magnus sidesteps the threat.
Wow, and a really sneaky tactic there from Wesley So. That did cause Magnus to raise his eyebrows. The black rook sacrificed itself, but if white's queen was distracted, if it was deflected away and captured that black rook, then the white rook would have fallen prey to the black queen. So white's queen has to actually keep her own rook nice and safe. Magnus there forced to retreat from the centre where he wanted to be, but it was just a one-move trap from Wesley So, and the world champion didn't fall for it.
Wow. I didn't expect this move, actually, because we're kind of taught when we're younger, don't push pawns where you're weakest. And on the left side of the board, Wesley is lacking a pawn. So I'm really confused as to why he pushed a pawn and just allowed Magnus to make a very easy pass pawn.
Trade. Yeah, as you mentioned, the pass pawn, that is the white pawn on the C line. That has no more rival. It will start to sprint up the board later on in an endgame. First, Magnus just exchanging queens. So also black has an isolated pawn on that left side. So strategically, definitely not desirable from Wesley. So I think he's feeling the pressure, Wesley. I think he just wants to get this game over with and survive it if possible. But sometimes the best form of defence is actually just patience, just digging deep, just keeping the status quo. And it would have been incredibly difficult for Magnus to create a passed pawn. Wesley has definitely helped him with the last couple of moves. And again, running away from the trade, which would have led to a hopeless endgame for black. If the queens had come off, white's king is just too active compared to the black king.
Yes, and there you can see Magnus enjoying his position and enjoying the atmosphere in the Oslo arena. And for our quiz of the day, we're asking you to send us your comments, your memories, priceless moments, or your questions. And this is in partnership with our friends at MasterCard. And Adia G says, do you remember what was your first impression of chess when you played your first game? So, David, what did you think of the game?
I fell in love with the winning more than the chess itself. I remember I played my dad and I'm not sure whether he let me win or whether I did beat him kind of fair and square. But either way, I fell in love with the winning. I thought, oh, wow, I can beat adults.
Wow.
I have something that I'm not bad at. So
it's a lot of the sports kind of aspect to it as well for you, the winning, the competition kind of thing.
Definitely. I mean, the older I get, the more I see the artistic beauty in chess, the pretty patterns, and maybe the creativity. But when I was young, it was all about the winning.
Yeah. I can totally relate to that because I remember the first time my father taught me the move. So Magnus does have a passed pawn and the queen is defending it. When my father first taught me the game, I was like, oh my God, this game is so boring. And then he taught me a few patterns here and there. And then I became addicted to the winning and I just love that. And I had chess figured out. Lastly, unfortunately, that only lasted maybe 2 years. And then I had to get better.
Yeah, but that's the thing. We all fall in love with the winning at first, but it's also just bringing people together. It's also that community spirit. And OK, meanwhile, in this game, we have seen a trade of rooks. That's been a big, big development. Usually, we would say that's in Magnus Carlsen's favour, a trade of rooks, because now it's a pure queen endgame and he has an extra pawn. Also, White has 2 passed pawns, not just one. White has a pawn on the E line and on the C line that both could run forward. But the kings are both open. And while the White king is open, it's going to be incredibly difficult to kind of push this advantage and turn it into the full point. White's king is going to be a constant target for checks from the black queen, especially look out for diagonal checks later on. That's the key in queen endgames. But now Magnus, can he push his pawns? The black king also is going to race over towards the centre to stop White's pawn in the middle there. So, yeah, right now, queen endgames, they're the most difficult to evaluate in chess. They're the most difficult to kind of navigate. One wrong slip, if you put your queen on the wrong square or if you put your king on the wrong square, it's just game over. Either way, Wesley, so he's banking on the fact that Magnus might get lost in this maze of complications later.
Wow.
We say Magnus is one of the best endgame players in the world, but this is a difficult one. It looks like he's getting ready to push a pawn, however. Is he going to push a pawn forward? He moved his mouse forward there. He's just retreated it and clicked away. So just, again, not trusting his first instincts, Magnus. That's been a trend over the last 2 days where he's struggled. And he's still taking a bit of time on this next move. Does he push a pawn or does he relocate the king? It's a difficult decision for White.
And Levon Aronian has won game 1 today against Shakhriyar Mamdyarov, a draw between Maxim Vachier-Lagrave and Timur Radjabov. But 3 matches, game 1 still going on. And it's looking good for Hikaru Nakamura against Jan-Christoph Duda, sitting behind Magnus there. And Anish Giri and Artemiev the bar. I think very much in the middle between those two. But in this one, the bar is slightly over to Magnus' side. But it's something about his face that is, not too happy, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's pure focus. Maybe just after the last 2 days, he's realised, OK, you need to dig deep in order to beat these top guys. They're world-class for a reason. And he knows that despite being a pawn up, it's still extremely difficult. So he did indeed push a pawn as White. We know that Magnus loves to push his corner pawns there on the A and the H files. He loves to push those pawns forward just, again, to create space, to kind of clamp down on his opponent's pawns and for a pawn race in an endgame.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Black's king heading towards the White central pawn.
Key kind of idea here. And incidentally, Magnus hasn't actually won a game since he was declared the winner of the MELTWATER Champions Chess Tour. So that has to be frustrating, especially for someone as competitive as the world champion.
Yeah, that's a long streak, if you think about it. Very rarely has Magnus Carlsen in his career gone that many games without winning. So there we go. Meanwhile, Wesley So has blockaded White's central pawn, and Magnus, he's done to push forward. And I think the reason, actually, it's a very deep reason, but Yeah, the reason Magnus did push his h-pawn forward earlier as white is because now, if black gives a check with his queen on the diagonal, white is actually getting ready to block with his own queen. And if we end up with the queens disappearing, even if Wesley wins a pawn back in the process, I think all king and pawn endgames are going to be winning for white because of the pawn structure on the right-hand side of the board. Black's pawns can never, ever step forward. So Magnus, definitely, he's looking 10, 20 moves into the future, and he's thinking, OK, now I have the opportunity to trade queens. Black can never, ever allow that. And when you have that type of idea in your mind, you will be able to bully your opponent, often with that trade. And, OK, Magnus there, either talking to himself to inspire him or maybe singing along with the song. OK, Wesley is the one thinking this time. And it's not easy. How does black improve his position if he doesn't give checks? The black queen can dive maybe into the white half of the board, deep down into that bottom right corner. That's very, very tempting. Maybe it doesn't threaten anything, however.
But it does kind of restrain the white queen. So that could be like a good option, because at the minute, I mean, if white is left unchallenged, white will just simply step the queen up one square and then, almost like a horse, move it to the d4 square in the middle of the board, and suddenly the position will be maximized. Yeah. And maybe even she will threaten to swap off queens. So black has to do something aggressive, like you say. And I like the move you suggested.
Yeah, so we're thinking the black's queen should actually get ambitious and maybe jump into the corner here and start harassing the white king from the side, for example, or from behind. If the white king ever steps forward up the board, then it will have to face some annoying checks. And this looks very, very tempting for black. We should meanwhile talk about white's plan. If black just waits and sits still, white can bully black with the threat of a queen trade. So, for example, if black takes here, it will end up in the same. Let's just show this, though, if white goes in a different fashion. And here, white is actually completely winning because white will force a queen trade next with a check. And let's just show why this is winning. If the pawns disappear, it's actually level number of pawns, but white has a strong advanced pass pawn here that's protected, and black's pawns, meanwhile, on the other side, are easy targets. White's king is just going to advance, and while the black king is distracted, white will pick up all the pawns. This is why this pawn is so key. It stops the advance of black's pawns on this side. And meanwhile, if we go back to the game, Wesley, he knows he can't trade down to a pawn endgame. He's keeping the queens on, but he's done that by trading a set of pawns on this left side. And now Magnus has centralized his queen. This white queen is going to come up with a check, or maybe even to this square. How is black going to face this? Suddenly, it looks almost terminal for Wesley, so because if he takes this white pawn in the center of the board, we'll see a check. The black king will have to step back. We'll see another check. The black king has to step back again. If it goes to the right, it would have been checkmated. And now Magnus Carlsen, for example, can pick off some pawns, maybe with some checks. He can even come across with a check and start going for some of the black pawns. Either way, this looks really, really scary now for Wesley. So, and remember, white still has this, whoops, not that one. White still has this pawn running up the board.
David.
And we're going to see this, actually.
Wow.
You've predicted the future. And
okay, we've got this position on the board. I was just showing an example, but Magnus actually went for it. And it's all about this white pawn. It's going to creep up the board. And note how Wesley, so this black king, wherever it goes, comes with consequences. If it steps back, then this pawn drops with a check. If it steps to the side, then this pawn falls with a check. It's all about checks. That's why Wesley has to put his king towards the corner. But look at this, again, a check. And
no, but he put his king right in the eye line of that capture, and suddenly Magnus just won a pawn with check.
This pawn was dropping anyway. If it went to the corner, then there would have been a check, and this pawn would have dropped. So right now, Magnus is a whole pawn up for free, and it's an important pawn. It's this pawn, and it's a clear runner. So if we jump into the current position, I think Magnus, he's going to try and find a square where his queen will defend all the pawns. There we go. He gives another check, and then he'll start running with this. And he's going to hope he can hide the white king, maybe behind his own pawns in the corner, away from the black queen's checks.
Wow, so it's looking really good for Magnus right now, if I understand you guys correctly.
Very, very good.
Yeah.
Real chances of winning. And by real, I mean, like, probably 80%, I would say.
Yeah, and just the lines I was showing there, you can stumble across them in Queen Endgames. Anyone can stumble across these lines and work them out by looking at direct checks, especially in Queen Endgames, but in chess in general. Just always look for the checks first, because they narrow your opponent's options. If your opponent only has one forced reply on every turn, it means you can look deeper into the future. And it's easier to calculate long variations if all of your opponent's moves are forced. And that's what happened there. Magnus saw a forcing line. It was 6 or 7 moves deep, maybe, but every single one of black's moves was pretty much obligatory. So, yeah, right now Magnus advancing with the white king. He can hide in two different ways. Either the white king can hide amongst its pawns on the right side of the board, or maybe he can make a run for it and hide up towards the centre, up towards the left, because then any checks from the black queen might be blocked by the white queen. So two potential hiding places for the white king. That's the key. And, OK, the checks begin. They're going to go on for a long, long time, these checks.
Is that Wesley's only hope, to keep checking Magnus?
Yeah, he's got to slow white down, otherwise white just pushes his extra pawn on the left side.
Yeah, and that's the only thing that Magnus must always calculate. He must always plan for a safe home for his king to hide. Otherwise, Wesley would just use the queen and just check the king until the end of time, and you don't want that, so...
Yeah, and look how nicely placed the white queen is as well. She's in the centre of the board. She controls any square that the black queen wants to use to give a check. So this is, again, queen endgame 101. It's just put your queen in the middle of the board, keep your king safe, and the rest will work itself out.
Yeah, we make it sound very easy.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult, trust me. I've lost so many queen endgames in my career. But for Magnus Carlsen, he makes it look easy, right?
Yeah, that's true.
That's why he's a bit like Bobby Fischer in the past. Even against the world-class players, even against his biggest rivals, he makes things look very, very simple.
And there we see Wesley improving his queen position, trying to get the queen ready to give some checks along the diagonal. And it's Magnus who delivers the first check. And Magnus is doing everything you say, putting the queen in the centre, hiding the king.
Yeah, I must say I've never seen anyone as good in queen endgames as Magnus Carlsen. I remember watching a game from the World Blitz Championship a few years ago. He was in a hopeless queen endgame, but he set up a cunning trap of stalemate. He put his own king in the corner, then he sacrificed his queen at the right moment, forced his opponent to stalemate him. So he's resourceful, but he also knows exactly when to put his queen in the middle of the board.
We saw this amazing queen ending with 𝙬𝙬𝙬𝙬, wasn't it?
Yeah,
and
double queen endgame?
Yeah, double queen ending.
Was that 𝙬𝙬𝙬𝙬 against someone?
Yeah, it was. I just remember there was a very impressive word. OK.
OK, actually, looks like Wesley So's gone. We don't have an official result, but it does look like he just resigned. White's queen was about to gobble up a second pawn wherever the black king goes.